Good afternoon passengers, welcome to Martel Air. My name's Amanda and I'll be your pilot for today. We're just beginning boarding for flight number 12 from Canberra to Temora, so grab your seats while I finish up the last steps of the pre-flight inspections of the Cessna Grand Caravan, the pride of the Martel Air fleet. And we'll be moving inside the plane quickly because that business jet next to us is loud. Better. Before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspection complete. Parking brake handle set. Electrical switches off. Ignition switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Bleed air heat switch is off. Power lever idle. Prop RPM max. Fuel condition cut off. That's working. And fuel shut off knob push on. Battery switch on. Cabin lights on. Cockpit lighting set. Flaps up. And no smoking lights on. The weather today is wet, moist, damp, but slowly clearing, and we'll be cruising at an altitude of about 12,000 feet trying to get over most of this weather. And we'll be flying over a spot 5 miles from the town of Gundagai, which any Australians in the passenger cabin will know what I might be rambling about a little bit. Your cabin crew today is me, and your emergency exit's located to the back of the cabin where you entered the plane. I also have a door up here by me, and if you see me leave, please follow me quickly. Our in-flight catering services are provided by our wonderful passengers, so I hope you packed something interesting. And it is good to hear that you have a box of treats for my co-pilot Wing Commander Lamington, who as always will be keeping an eye on the instruments for us today. Engine start checklist. Battery switch on. Beacon light on. Avionics 1 on. Bus volts check. Emergency power lever normal. Inertial separator bypass. EIS readings check. Propeller area clear. Fuel boost switch on. Fuel boost on, check. Fuel pressure low not shown, check. Fuel flow 0, check. Starter switch start. Ignition on, check. Oil PSI check. NG stable. Fuel condition low idle. Fuel flow check. NG climbing. And NG stable. Starter switch off. EIS readings check. Battery amps check. Generator load check. Fuel boost switch normal. Avionics 2 on. Nav lights on. Engine start checklist complete. And just looking around outside, I can confirm that this is basically the weather we've got. It has been utterly soaked since about sunset yesterday, so we're only just getting back into actual flying weather. I mean, I will fly this thing through whatever weather it's rated for, but it would have been exciting if we'd been trying to swim down the runway this morning. We're now ready for departure, so please fasten your seatbelts and turn off your devices, apart from those used to watch this stream. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Full of frogs. Yes, I expected it would be down by the airport here. We can definitely see some lovely puddles for them. And you may notice in a few spots I've also acquired something which adds in the proper birds for all of Eastern Australia. So there's a lot of pigeons on the tarmac at the moment. Hopefully we don't get any minced pigeon. Before taxi checklist. Taxi lights on. Seatbelt lights on. Taxi clearance. Canberra ground, Martel 1-2 with information Yankee, requests taxi for takeoff, west departure. Taxiing, hold short of runway 35 by taxiway Charlie 4 Charlie Bravo November, Martel 1-2. Taxi clearance, check. Nav source set. Prop RPM to minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Inertial separator to bypass. Parking brake off. And yes, hopefully we will not be mincing any birds. That is bad for both the birds and the aircraft. I also happen to, after last week's discussions of the fact that at some point I should get the visual upgrades for Canberra Airport, I discovered that it's in the spring sale at the moment, so I've also acquired that. It is quite a bit more detailed, lovely taxiway markings, and they've actually improved the designations for the taxiways, so it actually understands things a little better. And yes, overall, rather a nice little upgrade. We should see that on the way past. Okay, let's get to this taxi. Now that is in fact Charlie 3 next to us, not Charlie 4, so we will be looping around. Quite nice little pigeon models actually. Now, I don't know if I've actually flown this plane since the last stream flight, in fact, because since the acquisition of the Caribou for Flight Sim with the very lovely assistance of one of the passengers, I have been practicing flying that while also working out a little bit of modification for it for fixing a few of the bugs in the flight sim iteration of it. So that's coming along quite nicely, and I'm looking forward to when we get to introduce that on stream. That is going to be quite an interesting little flight. I'm also working up another set of checklist documents because we all know that one of the main things that you're coming here for is the hot checklist action, and I've decided that I'm going to have some fun with the formatting of it. So The checklists for the Grand Caravan are, as you can see, lovely modern formatting, very neat, very clean, very 2000s. Of course, the Caribou was built in the 60s, and one of the things that was sent to me along with the aircraft itself was some of the US military flight documents, pilot's manual and pilot's checklists for the Caribou. And the formatting on these is definitely of its time. These are 1972 and 74 for the main documents, I think. So I've been working on making myself checklists that fit the Caribou. Concentrating on taxiing while I am coming up to this corner. Oh, look at that blue sky. It's so strange. And here we can see the upgraded, that's what the terminal actually looks like, right down to the way too much advertising. Big glass-fronted windows, as opposed to the other types of windows here. Big glass-fronted terminal so that you can look at the planes manoeuvring about, see when yours is, see if there's anything interesting, be a plane nerd, all of that fun stuff. Little Qantas hangar. And they've stopped telling me to taxi all the way down to the end of the displaced threshold of runway 35, which is useful, because it's no plane that I fly out of Canberra needs the displaced threshold. The Caribou doesn't even need the runway if it's got the displaced threshold. It will take off before the actual runway, which is hilarious in something that heavy. So yes, the Caribou checklists are going to look more like this. I have gust of wind, or my wrist just tweaked there. They look like they are made on a 1970s. It's not a typewriter, but it is a printing technology kind of based on typewriters. It's digital, but you'd have like a disc per font, and it's great. So, you know, all the one font size, lovely, clear, typewriter-ish font, lots of fun. And the current draft of that, so I'm doing it at A5, but the current draft is 14 pages long. The Caribou is serious about checklists. It's great. And here we are with the November taxiway onto runway 35, aka onto the actual threshold. Okay, before takeoff checklist, parking brake set, altimeter QNH set, standby flight instruments check, fuel boost switch normal, fuel tank selectors both on, fuel shut-off knob push on, standby alt power on, anti-ice system 16 degrees, shouldn't need it, inertial separator handle normal, autopilot setup, altitude set for cruise. That is moving way too slowly. You know, on a lot of planes you can set this so that it goes by thousands of feet instead of 100. Not this one. You're always tweaking the hundreds of feet knob. Altitude set, flight level change mode engage, speed set to VY, heading set to runway heading, heading mode engaged, and bank mode engaged. Autopilot setup complete. transponder on Alt, flaps to takeoff position, takeoff clearance. Canberra Tower, Martel 1-2 is at runway 35, ready for departure to the west. Cleared for takeoff, runway 35, Martel 1-2. Takeoff clearance check, strobe lights on, landing lights on, seatbelt lights on, parking brake release, fuel condition high idle, prop RPM max. Before takeoff checklist complete. Wind's 257 at 8, so a little bit of crosswind. Canberra Tower, Martel 1-2, acknowledge, continue for west departure. Flaps up. Autopilot engaged, which is something I've not been able to say with all of the caribou flying that I've been doing, as it has no autopilots. Range is good. Set 1850 RPM. Lovely. And we're going to climb until we have cleared these lovely right on the departure if we turn west hills/mountains. I figure we'll probably get to Temora a little bit quicker if we don't crash. I find that crashing is really bad for your schedule. And Commander Lamington is happy with what he sees by the looks of things. Transferring to 125.9er, Martel 1-2. Canberra approach, Martel 1-2, type Cessna Caravan, 5 miles north of Canberra Airport, 4,700 feet, request transition of Charlie airspace. Squawk 4611, Martel 1-2. Cleared through the Charlie airspace, Martel 1-2. Okay, should be good to turn towards our actual nav path now. look at that terrain clearance radar. Yep, there is absolutely no red on our terrain clearance radar, which explains the very happy doggo next to me. Excellent. Oof, and if I put that weather radar on, blue skies. This is why we go above the clouds. It's one of the great secrets of the weather that whenever it's ridiculously overcast, there's still blue skies above those clouds. Unless it's more clouds. Sometimes you get more clouds above those clouds. That's a ridiculous thing. But from this side, where they can't drop their water on you because you are above them, they're just lovely and fluffy. Okay, temperature range looks good, torque range is good. Leaving the traffic area, so landing lights off. The comments in chat that are just strings of emojis are delightful to me because there is absolutely no way that I could read them out on the stream. It's one of the fun things with emojis is that they are just not verbalizable. Like, you can say the name of the emoji, but that gets weird, especially with some of them. I mean, as somebody who keeps designing iguana emoji and giving them increasingly ridiculous names, I can, you know, it's something I have fun with. So yes, I think we had 40 to 50 mil of rain over the past 24 hours. So if we'd been parked on one of the grass general aviation parking areas, it would have been an interesting one to get. I mean, one, get the plane wheels out of the mud, and two, get to the plane without sinking. Almost rowboat weather. Yeah, it's one of those situations where the people who have those amphibious planes where they've got retractable wheels built into the floats, those could be useful on days like this morning's weather, which the Grand Caravan actually does have an amphibian version. It's exactly the same sort of thing, but instead of those three wheels that I was rambling about last week, you put two big amphibious pods on. I do not know of that one existing in Flight Sim, unfortunately, but it is a delightful thing. And as to row your plane, yes, I actually have seen some stuff where they do that. Because taxiing about on the water gets a bit weird because currents happen, and if you're trying to get up close to the dock, because if it's a seaplane, you have to dock them rather than parking. A lot of them will actually come with a small anchor, which is just delightful. But in a lot of situations, when it's too crowded to be operating the big pilot cooling device on the front of the plane, you can just sit on the floats and paddle. People will actually do that for serious reasons. And just that comparison delights me. And of course the ones where the floats are on the where the wheels are built into the floats have the delightful thing of you have to have, like, on a plane with landing gear, you'll have an alarm built in quite often for you're trying to land with your gear up. Amphibians actually have to have two of those alarms, and you have, like, because a lot of the times if you land with your gear up on water, it's good. If you land with your gear down on land, it's good. If you land with your gear up on land, you will utterly destroy, at very least, the floats. And if you land with your gear down on water, you will be upside down and possibly in 100 pieces. Because a little bit too much drag from just sticking the wheels in, so it's kind of wee ka-chunk. That did not go on camera angle in. Wee ka-chunk. So they almost, instead of having green, so normal landing gear warning lights, you'll have green for down and locked, and you'll have either red or off, depending, for up. On amphibians, you will have green for down and blue for up. Because are you landing on a green thing or a blue thing? And then to get them out of the water, you taxi it on the water up to essentially a boat ramp or a beach or other such things. Put the wheels down in the water, at which point you cut your speed to about 1/10 of what it would have been otherwise, because they do a lot of drag, and then you have to drive it up out of the water, which is, it looks ridiculous, and it's so much fun with how ridiculous it is. And we are just coming up on our cruising altitude, and as we are above this ridiculous weather, we can have the seatbelt lights off. Anti-ice system. Oh, we might have the anti-ice at least for the pedostatic install heat. We will have that anti-ice on because it is -3 outside the plane at the moment. Inertial separator normal. Back to 89% NG and 1750 RPM, which I have spent some time working out is the good cruise settings. Going to 133.15, Martel 12, goodbye. Melbourne Centre, Martel 12 at 12,000 feet. Okay, and I was getting the cruise set up for ATC interrupted, 89%, 1750-ish, fuel balance check, temperature check. Lovely. Version of O Canada about float planes and flying boats. I'm not going to try to write that on the fly, and I'm not going to sing it because nobody deserves that. Although one of the things that I was actually... Oh, they're doing another ATC frequency transfer. Was I just on that frequency? heading to 119.5, Martel 12, goodbye. Melbourne Centre, Martel 12, 12,000 feet. And we are definitely over the crinkly bits part of Australia for a lot of this flight. As I was saying, one of the things that I do find fascinating and can info dump about a little bit is the difference between float planes and flying boats, and why float planes are so much more common. So, float plane is a normal plane where you've stuck one or more floats on it instead of landing gear, or with landing gear built in. The single float ones are bizarre to look at. You got it for certain naval fighters in World War II, where they've basically just bolted a canoe to the bottom of a fighter and try not to let it tip over while you're landing. Maybe they'll stick some little floats on sticks out on the wingtips, but those are extra drag, so it makes your fighter slower, even slower than bolting a canoe to the bottom would. Usually you'll have 2 floats on most of them these days because that's balanced. So technically it's a catamaran plane instead of a canoe plane. And then flying boats are the ones where, well, why do we bolt something on when we could just bolt wings onto the boat? So you get the Catalina, the Spruce Goose, all of these, where the water hull and the aircraft hull are the same piece of engineering. So you can make those a lot bigger for a start, which is why those have been popular at various times. A lot of the early transatlantic airliners were actually flying boats. The Boeing Clipper, because when you have 1920s and 30s engines and you're carrying passengers, knowing that if your engines fail you can land on the water at least nominally is comforting to the passengers, and also stopping off at little islands to refuel where they can get you the fuel but they can't get you a runway sized for that sort of plane. Which is actually responsible for a lot of the naval elements that have carried over into civil aviation. The modern, the standard pilot's uniform is based on maritime uniforms because the Boeing Clipper flights were basically boats with a shortcut. So they decided to copy that, and that set a lot of the standards. There's also a bunch of the military aviation stuff leaning in there because naval aviation has been there basically from the start, but a lot of the civilian uniforms actually trace back to the flying boats of early airliners rather than the military connection directly. It's also why the hat's so adorable. But yes, so for the most part, float planes are more popular these days than flying boats, and one of the major reasons that I've seen for that is that the float parts can kind of get damaged if there's anything in the water, and unbolting one of your plain canoe feet and just replacing it with a new one, or unbolt the float and take it off to a workshop, patch it up, stick it back on, much easier than, oh, we've got a hole in the fuselage now. So it's an interesting one, although you do still get some flying boats. I was looking at the various de Havilland Canada planes because, of which the Caribou is the DHC-4. There's one of the de Havilland Canada planes that's, you know, built in collaboration with like 3 other companies and has like 4 names, is, it looks a bit caribou-ish, especially on the tail, but it is a flying boat for firefighting purposes. And the big advantage to a flying boat for that is that if they need to it's a water bomber, so, you know, fly over a fire, dump several tons of water out onto this fire, fly off, refill. And one of the advantages of doing that with a flying boat is that the refill process is land on the water. Is it still called it's still called landing when it's on the water. It feels like calling that landing is like contradictory. That's a weird thought from a tangent of a tangent. Anyway, you land on the water, but instead of trying to slow down, you just hold 70 knots as you go across this lake. And then when the water tank's full, you close up the big intake hatches on the bottom of the plane, take off again. So where you get helicopters with their, you know, quite big buckets that are just, they can fly over a lake, dip the bucket in, and then fly to the fire. The DHC, I think it's the 515, this thing will just take 10, 20 times the water than that from just kind of not quite landing with some hatches open. Doesn't even need pumps. Just like ram pressure of flying along at 70 knots, which is a terrifying speed for boat things. Beriev BE200. Oh yes, doing the similar thing but with a jet that is significantly larger. Yeah, it's... I mean, being a Russian plane, that one, you get terrifying things from Russian planes just in general. I mean, they did the Akrana plan, and technically they have some claim on the Antonov 225, but that was actually Ukrainian, just kind of Ukrainian under the Soviet Empire, as opposed to the current Russian Empire. I realise that they don't call themselves that, but, you know. But yes, and one of my favourite things about these water bombers is that you don't actually want them to put out a fire on your house. Water bombers are not designed with the notion of any structures under them being savable anyway, and dumping multiple tons of water from quite high at quite speed, it'll take your roof out, but your house will not be on fire. So, you know, they're really good for bushfires, that sort of thing, where it's trees under there. It's nice having this lovely clear weather. Ooh, a little bit of clouds getting up to our altitude, little puffy ones, but mostly fine. Now, instead of the usual rambling and then trying to read out a Banjo Paterson poem while still flying, today we are flying not over the town of Gundagai, but over a place 5 miles from Gundagai, which I was going to look up, you know, the original poem and / song that goes into this, and instead I found some fascinating stuff on the history of the dog on the Tuckerbox that the concept of an original for that gets weirder. So, the dog on the Tuckerbox. Step 1. Tuckerbox. A box that you store tucker in tucker being food. The same thing that the jolly swagman of Waltzing Matilda had a tucker bag. And there is a story of various forms that I think basically counts as Australian legend, because I couldn't actually find any single original for this other than the first solidly recorded written account was in 1850 something, 1857, and it is a fairly short poem that not even a very good one. I'm actually just not going to read that one out because it's kind of dull and not good. Yes, I'm very picky about my canine disobedience. Ooh, that's some good clouds. Canine disobedience tales. And yes, I'm sure that Wing Commander Lamington is very keen on the stories of the dog on the Tuckerbox, because it shows him what he can do if I start being problematic. So, the basic story goes that there is somebody who is driving usually cattle or sheep, and actually there we see the town of Gundagai itself, which is about 5 miles south of us. A guy who is driving livestock through this countryside, and he's mistreating his dog. Various descriptions of how he's mistreating the dog, but the basic story is that he gets what he deserves with this. And the dog breaks his lead and just goes and sits on the Tuckerbox. No, you're not getting any food today. I'm just going to sit on the lid of this and stop you getting any food. And widely reported is that in the popular versions of the poem slash story slash song, as were actually told slash sung by people at the time, was that the dog was not sitting on the Tuckerbox. There's an extra letter in that word. There's an H missing from the popular clean retelling of the story. The dog made it so that, no, you're not having dinner tonight. And in the clean, popular, these days version, that is by sitting on the Tuckerbox. So, luckily, Wing Commander Lamington is not mistreated. He is fed quite well. He is not subject to any corporal punishment, sergeant punishment, lieutenant punishment, or anything else of the sort. So I do not think I need to fear anything from my loyal canine co-pilot. And it's not so much that Wing Commander Lamington knows how to behave, it's that I know how to behave. Now, in later, pretty nicer retellings of the story, the dog is often said to be sitting on the Tuckerbox to protect it for, because loyal dog protects master, etc., etc. So, the dog is sitting on the Tuckerbox to stop anyone else getting to it. But in the original stuff, it's, no, you mistreat your dog, they stop you eating. And I think we can all agree that animal-based revenge is a good approach to dealing with animal cruelty. So, because this is, such a thing, etc., etc., there is now... The reason I could find the spot 5 miles from Gundagai is that there is a statue of a dog sitting on a Tuckerbox. I'm pretty sure it's like proper bronze statue and everything. 5 miles from Gundagai on the main highway. It's essentially turned into a petrol station and cafe with a bit more tourist tat. And there is the statue of the dog on the Tuckerbox. And it was not originally there, because for some reason there's one like splinter version where they decided that 5 miles from Gundagai doesn't sound as good. Maybe we should make it 9 miles from Gundagai. No reason other than it sounds better. But they eventually decided that they would move the dog on the Tuckerbox monument to 5 miles from Gundagai. For 1, that's the original distance, and 5 is just as good a number of miles as 9. They both work, they both have the same scan. But it's also just a better spot for tourist purposes, like just a better spot on the highway to be 5 miles from Gundagai. I'm not sure if I've ever actually been to Gundagai, but I have been to the dog on the Tuckerbox. And like, this is a life-size statue of the dog, so I'm 100% sure they will not have modelled it, unlike the 50-foot tall concrete sheep. But that should be far enough that we can swoop round and see. So the nav point that I've got set for this is actually on the, let's just acknowledge it as dog on the Tuckerbox truck stop. It's a truck stop with a... I'm not sure what the comparison is from Australian culture / legend to American. It's like same sort of cultural position as almost like, I don't know, Johnny Appleseed, but dog disobedience. Just a general folklore figure that, yes, I'm sure there's a source for, sort of thing. So circling round to get back to dog on the Tuckerbox for just looking at the thing. And there we've got a Gundagai. And yeah, I think I would classify dog on the Tuckerbox as a feel-good story. You know, so long as you're not the one whose Tuckerbox it is, but if you are, you deserve it. The joys of trying to do tourist spotting from 12,000 feet. But I'm pretty sure that's the Hume. But that little, you can see, pull-off spot with a few buildings and a bunch of parking, that is 5 miles from Gundagai. I think there's also some debate as to whether we should put this north or south. They eventually went with north. Oh yeah, so Gundagai, and then you're up the Hume for 5 miles. So, you know, quite a convenient little spot for overpriced pies. I seem to recall it was all just kind of a bit more expensive than seemed sensible the time we went there, or well, the time we stopped there on our way somewhere else. Yeah, nice little spot, good statue, and people will often get some rubber novelties, you know, made out of a squishy brown rubber, and leave them on the Tuckerbox with the dog. I find that utterly hilarious. You get all of this statue is traditionally vandalized by doing XYZ, and, you know, all of the dog statues where you can see where people pat the dog. Apparently we've got traffic. Melbourne Centre, traffic not in sight, Martel 1-2. You get the standard way that you celebratorily vandalize any given statue, and on dog statues that are made of bronze you can see where they're turned gold by the amount of pets they get on usually the snout. There's a few statues where you can tell that some other traditions are happening, but yeah, one of the traditional things to do with the dog on the Tuckerbox is rubber toys for what else the dog might have done on the Tuckerbox. And yes, seeing where people have pet the dog statues is just so good. Although my favourite one, and the one I've seen most often, is not actually on bronze statues. It's from donation boxes. So the main guide dog association in Australia has donation boxes all over the place, usually, like outside a supermarket, that sort of thing. And the donation box is a life-size Labrador in guide dog harness, just sitting there, basically the same pose as Wing Commander Lamington. And being, a fairly good-sized Labrador, these come up to, reasonable height for patting this Labrador statue if you wanted to. And one of the things that encourages that even more is that the coin slot in these donation boxes is just centre top of the head, which you might think looks a little weird, but it means that every time you put a coin into this donation box, your hand's already there, you give the dog a pat. And a lot of these, you can see the wear, because it's not painted plastic, it's like layers of coloured plastic to make the colour last a little bit longer. And people are starting to wear through on almost every one of these that I've ever seen, of just slip a coin in, pat the dog. It is such an effective little fundraiser, and I love it so much. Like, most charity donation boxes, you get the good feeling of giving money to charity. This one, you get to pat a dog too. So, that is Gundagai and the spot 5 miles from it. Which is, mostly on our way to Temora. Which, we've got a little bit of a ways to go. About 17 minutes before we really get there. And it's looking like things are a little bit more clear the further we go towards Temora, because all of the excessive exceptional weather was happening on the coast, because that's where the water comes from. At one point they were predicting that Friday was going to be 90 mil of rain, which is not really conceivable to me. That's like a month's worth of rain, or 2 months. Just so long as it's not doing it for my weekend away in a little while, that'll be good. And speaking of, so next week's stream, which is going to be a little later in the afternoon because I will have other things to do for most of the day, will be, as previously discussed, we're going to Temora to fly the Fokker triplane in Australian Flying Corps colours that I've painted up. So, next week's stream, instead of being cruising around over Australia and interesting weather, will be, weather permitting, doing some airshow type stuff in a Fokker triplane around Temora. and that is because the Temora Aviation Museum is one of the bigger collections of flyable historic warplanes in Australia, and I've decided that clock change tonight, yes. I'm so glad that most of my devices do that by themselves. There's only like 3 things I have to do manually, and also remember that even happened. And this is right after that other 1 hour change, so it'll end up being 2 hours different on stream than it was a couple months ago. So, better timing for British viewers next week, I guess. What sentence was I in the middle of? But yeah, so, Temora Aviation Museum having all of those historic warbirds, I have just decided that that is where the Martel Air replica Fokker triplane lives. So, when we want to do some flights in that, the flight before, we'll be flying out to Temora. Because, if there's one thing that's important in life, it's commitment to the bit. So, much like every flight in Martel Air starts where the last one finished, the Fokker triplane is stored at Temora, and, if we want to fly it somewhere else, we will have to fly it somewhere else. And likewise, the Caribou that is currently being worked up is going to be based out of Canberra, and the Martel Air freight flights are going to be done as round trips, because that's going to be more fun. And I'll also be playing with the weight and balance system, because the flight out to somewhere will be heavily loaded, and the flight back will be unloaded. Or possibly, if there's occasion to do a pickup mission, the flight out will be unloaded and the flight back will be loaded. But getting to experience those 2 very different flight models when it's got, 0 tons of cargo versus 3.9 tons of cargo, which is about the weight of this plane fully loaded. You just, loading an entire Cessna Caravan's worth of weight into another plane and flying it at honestly similar speeds, similar altitudes. The Caribou is not a subtle plane, and I'm having so much fun learning how to modify flight sim files to fine-tune some various systems and fix things that they didn't actually finish before releasing their plane onto the marketplace. And of course, making ridiculous sets of checklists, about 2/3 of which could be replaced by hitting Control E, which just continuously amuses me, of all of the startup stuff, all of the checks. Does not actually need to be done in Flight Sim, but it's good checklist content, and I love it. And then, so next week will be the Fokker triplane airshow flights, which I've not been able to work out how to get an external camera that's like your view from the ground and be able to fly the plane at the same time. Looks like because of the increased rendering load from the fancy graphics, Flight Sim 2020 does not like to let you do that. But, I'll be talking through some things. I'll be trying to look if I can get my hands on a World War I dogfighting manual, I will work my way through that on stream. But, going through how the plane works, what it's like, the ridiculousness that is a rotary engine, the high praise of its performance and what that compares to these days. And then the week after that, I will be away. So, that will be a pre-recorded stream instead of going through the entire pre-flight checks document from the Cessna Grand Caravan Pilot's Operating Handbook, because I've managed to get a copy of the correct Pilot's Operating Handbook, which includes the full walkthrough of all of your pre-flight checks. And that's going to be at least half an hour of stream, if not more. There's a lot of checks. Like, you will see why whenever passengers are boarding, it's assumed that I've just finished the pre-flight checks. And we are getting in towards Temora. And of course Temora is a traffic channel, not a controlled airport. So we will have to do a general aviation approach and work out what runway we even want. So let's take it down. Step 1 flight level change, 135. Go. Attention passengers, we're now approaching Temora and I've switched on the seatbelt lights, which means I'd like you to fasten your seatbelts. Enjoy this riddle and more as we come in towards landing, and thank you again for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, get that altitude down to something more reasonable for spotting the airport. Did a bit of a strange thing, but no matter. Just get that pulled to idle. Okay, descent checklist. Anti-ice. On. Inertial separator. Normal. Altimeter QNH. Set. Nav source is still set. And coming into a traffic area, so landing lights on. And there is that one big cloud straight ahead of us, which looks like it is between us and Temora rather than directly over Temora, so that is helpful at least. I will say that the practice and familiarization I've been doing in the Caribou has been very good for my hand flying and general aviation skills, because the management systems on it are it's built for 3 crew members, all of whom are actively doing things, because you have a pilot and a co-pilot and a flight engineer and sometimes a load master as well. Whereas the Cessna Grand Caravan is designed to operate just fine with a crew of 1. Or in fact, 1 and a doggo. There are in fact some Grand Caravans where the controls in front of what I consider Wing Commander Lamington's position are in fact completely absent. There might be a flight display, or there might just be blank dashboard in front of that seat because it is, well, we can fit one more passenger. Which is an interesting look when you're used to the two pilot seats. Okay, looks like a 4,000 foot altitude will in fact put us in the middle of that cloud, so let's not do that. Let's try. Is the front passenger seat called shotgun in Australia? I don't know. I would not call it shotgun. I'm pretty sure there's another name for it here. I honestly can't remember what it is. I learned about shotgun from... It's probably a TV show. I think the quote was, "Driver picks the tunes, shotgun shuts his cake-hole." Feels like it's probably from Supernatural. But I honestly don't know. I'm sure there's a name for it here. It might be shotgun, it might not. Making sure that descent power settings do not stay on, because that is an easy trap to fall into. We are descending. I set the descent engine speeds, and then I keep the descent engine speeds and stall. I've not actually lost a plane to that, but it would be embarrassing to have that happen on stream. And yes, the goes back in history for shotgun. Like, I've seen some stuff about, you know, wagon riding in the old west, etc., where it's like literal shotgun. Like the person sitting up front who's not holding the reins, so they have free hands for a weapon. Which, you know. And yes, sterile cockpit. That's so the impression I'm getting is we will not be doing a visual inspection of the airfield. I get it. Oh? Nope. That patch of rain was in fact between us and Temora. Lovely. Looks like we've got quite the wind coming in from basically east. I'm pretty sure 05 is the big runway here. All that rain, and now we're just back out. But we'll overfly the runway and actually do an inspection, and then we'll start on our pattern. Neither runway is going to be amazing for this weather. Might do runway 36 actually. That's closer to the parking.
Temora traffic, Martel 12 is 3 miles southeast, 2,800 feet, entering the pattern for landing on runway 36.
Okay. Yep, 36 will be a good one. Okay, approach checklist, seatbelt lights on, fuel tank selectors both on, fuel condition high idle, prop RPM to max, flaps to approach position, landing lights on, inertial bypass, inertial separator to bypass, brakes off. So, Temora Airport has a couple of reasonably sized runways and also one grass runway that's usually barely even marked on the charts. Runway 05 would be the long runway option, and runway 36 is the slightly shorter but still paved runway that also happens to be the one that all of the parking aprons are up against, instead of having to taxi basically onto runway 36 or 18 anyway and do a backtrack taxi along the runway. May as well just land on the runway with the parking on it. And one of the things that's lovely about a direct north-south runway is that finding the reciprocal is really easy maths. Runway 36 points more or less due north, so we take the reciprocal course of more or less due south to do our downwind. And speaking of downwind, we watch the winds. That's it's quite a tailwind we picked up there, which is spicy. And that is enough of that.
Temora traffic, Martel 12 is turning base for landing runway 36.
And then we swing around to due north and find the runway again. Runway in sight. Final approach checklist. Autopilot's off. Seatbelt lights on, flaps to landing position, and airspeed into landing range.
Temora traffic, Martel 12 is on final runway 36 to land.
And there are more calls to a traffic channel than there would be to a controlled airport, because the only control is other people knowing where you are and not flying into you. So, lots of calls. The most interesting one and confusing that I've seen was Wagga Wagga Airport, which I'm sure we'll do on stream at some point, which has this lovely, beautiful, huge traffic control tower and is a traffic channel airport, not controlled, because that lovely, huge air traffic control tower is for control of the RAF base that shares the same runway and some of the apron. So you look at it and you think you should have traffic control, but no. Okay, slight headwind, and the crosswinds are reducing. Gonna be slightly long. Up and braking and reverse thrust. Lovely short landing, don't need to do any backtracking.
Temora traffic, Martel 12 is clear of runway 36.
Okay, after landing checklist. Flaps up, landing lights off, strobe lights off, anti-ice off, taxi lights on. And now we find some parking. Attention passengers, we've landed safely in Temora and local time is 2:20 PM. Please remain seated until the plane comes to a complete stop at whatever ridiculous parking spot we work out for ourselves. Because queuing for the exit in an 8-seater makes you look even more ridiculous than normal. Getting mildly lost. I don't know if this is actually meant to be a taxiway. Made a good landing, and then whatever taxiing this is. Aha! It is in fact a taxiway bisected by a random building. But the parking that I want is actually on the other side over there. Fuel stand. Now, one thing that I have been finding fascinating as I look through various flying technique things is the use of differential braking. Because some planes, that is basically your only way of controlling them to steer on the ground. And some other planes, the manual will specifically say, please don't do differential braking. So for example, the Caribou, which has lovely big wheels and excellent brakes for short landings, specifically says, please do not use differential braking unless absolutely necessary, because Caribou tyres are expensive, and Caribou steering gear is expensive. Now, where on here is a good... There's a parking spot. And also a van in my parking spot. Okay, the dog and crossbones paint job on that plane is adorable. Now you can get out of my way. I'm sure that the vans on the taxiway are some conspiracy by my enemies. Okay, shutdown checklist. Parking brake handle is set. Power lever idle. Bleed air heat switch off. Prop RPM to feather. Temperature range is stable. condition lever to shut off. Cut off. Inertial separator to normal. Make like an impressionist and Van Gogh. This time, I spotted the pun while I was doing the shutdown things. It's dreadful. I love it. External lights off. Attention passengers, this now concludes our flight from Canberra to Temora, and we here at Martel Air hope you've enjoyed your time in our tiny sky bus. Please wait until I've opened the door and you can calmly deplane in an orderly fashion. Our baggage handling services today will be provided by our wonderful passengers, so thank you for not leaving any of your luggage behind. Any personal belongings left behind as you leave the plane will be assumed to be a present to the co-pilot and enjoyed thoroughly. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, internal lights. So seatbelt light off, no smoking light off, cabin light off. Fuel boost switch off. NG is at 0. Lovely. Avionics 2 off. Avionics 1 off. And battery off. Fuel tank selectors both off. Oh, why did that pop back? So, thank you all in the chat for lovely company during this flight. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. And lovely view of the outside and badly driving fuel trucks and vans. And just the size comparison to the little one-seater. Just hilarious. We're going to pretend we didn't see... Oh, wait, no, you didn't see anyway because the map is completely blocking that part of the screen. So as far as you know, we didn't just have two different airport vehicles drive straight through the tail. That was certainly something. I was in the middle of a sentence that I have no idea what it was. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you next week, where instead of rambling on the way somewhere, I will be rambling about a 100-and-something-year-old plane that was praised for its flight performance in a way that is slightly hilarious now. And I think I will end the stream there.